AQA Common Exam Questions in the Populations topic. So this information has been taken from past paper questions from the AQA website. So question 1. In an investigation, carrot seeds were planted at different densities. After 120 days, the dry mass of the carrot plants were measured. The results are shown in the graph. So you've got population density, metre squared, going on the x-axis, dry mass of carrot plants in kilograms per metre squared in the y-axis. So what is the advantage of measuring the dry mass rather than the total mass of the carrot plants? Water mass may vary. So in biological organisms, where possible, you would take the dry mass so that you're not taking into account the fact that they're water, because water in each organism will vary. What type of competition is shown in this investigation? Well, you're using carrot plants of the same species, so it's intra-specific. Explain the shape of the curve. So from here to here, the denser the planting density, the greater the yield. But then above a planting density of about 30, competition for named resource or limiting factors means that it levels out the mass of the carrot plants. Okay, explain what is meant by succession. It is a change in community over time. This can either be due to change in environmental or abiotic factors or species present. What is meant by a climax community? It is a stable community where no further succession occurs. Question 3. Dengue is a serious disease that is caused by a virus. The virus is carried from one person to another by a mosquito. One method used to try to reduce the transmission of this disease is the sterile insect technique, or SIT. This involves releasing large numbers of sterile, infertile male into the habitat. These males have been made infertile by using radiation. Describe how the mark-release recapture method could be used to determine the population of A. aegypti at the start of the investigation. So first of all, you would capture or collect the sample, you would mark them and then release them. You would leave time for the mosquitoes to disperse before collection again, and then you would collect them and you would calculate the population, which is number in the first sample times by number in the second sample divided by the number of marked in the second sample. Question 4. Scientists investigated the process of succession on sand dunes. They measured the percentage cover of different species of plants on sand dunes of different ages. Some of the results the scientists obtained are shown in Figure 1. Describe how you determine the mean percentage cover for beach grass on a sand dune. So you would need to use a method of randomly determining the position, like random number table or random number generator. You would have to use a large number of quadrats. And then you would divide the total percentage by the number of quadrats. The scientists concluded that the results shown in Figure 1 were due to succession taking place. Use Figure 1 to explain why the scientists reached this conclusion. So beach grass, which is here, is the pioneer species. And these pioneers change the environment or habitat or conditions so that they become less hostile for, you could say, for the shrub bunch grass. or more suitable for the shrub bunch grass. And then the conifer or hardwood trees represent the climax community. The sundew is a small flowering plant growing in wet habitats such as bogs and marshes. The soil in bogs and marshes is acidic and has very low concentrations of some nutrients. The sundew can trap and digest insects. Describe how you would estimate the size of a population of sundews in a small marsh. So you would use a grid or divide the area into squares. You would use a method of obtaining random coordinates, like a random number generator. You would count the number or frequency in a quadrat. You would use a large sample and you would calculate a mean or average number. And then you would use a valid method of calculating the total number of sundews, like the mean number of plants per quadrat multiplied by the number of quadrats or metre squared in the marsh. Question 6. Algae are photosynthesizing organisms. Some grow on rocky shores. Scientists investigated the abundance of different species of algae at two sites, A and B, on a rocky shore. Site A was on the upper shore and Site B was on the lower shore. The diagram shows the location of sites A and B on the rocky shore. Table 1 shows some of the results the scientists obtained. The scientists recorded data from 40 large rocks at each site. Describe one method that the scientists could have used to ensure that the large rocks were chosen without bias. So we'd use coordinates, or number the rocks, and you would use a method of generating random numbers like a random number generator. The scientists used percentage cover rather than frequency to record the abundance of algae present. Suggest why. There would be too many to count, or the individual organisms are not identifiable. Apart from availability of water, describe and explain how two abiotic factors may have caused differences in the species of algae growing at sites A and B. So, you could have wave action, gives a firmer grip on the rock. Wind or air movements or less humid means there's more evaporation at site A. Light linked to photosynthesis at either site. Temperature linked to photosynthesis or respiration or enzymes or evaporation. And pH linked to enzymes or proteins. Use the information provided in Table 1 to explain why the diversity of consumers will be greater at Site B. There will be a greater variety of food or more food sources, more variety of habitats or niches. Question 7. What term is used to describe populations of different species living in the same habitat? That is a community. Different species occupy different ecological niches. Explain the advantage of species occupying different niches. There is less competition for food or resources. Scientists recorded the number of water beetle species in 30 lakes. In each lake, they measured the pH of the water and recorded whether there were any fish present. The graph shows their results. A student concluded that a decrease in acidity caused an increase in the number of water beetle species. Evaluate this conclusion. Right, well you can see that there is a correlation, that as the pH increases, the number of water beetle species increases. But correlation does not mean a causal effect. There could be other abiotic or biotic factors involved. There is variation in the number of species, beetle species at the same or similar pHs. So you can see here at pH sort of 5.5, there's 8 there, and then there's sort of similar ones at 15 there, 20 there. So at the same pH, there is quite a lot of variation. It's not a very strong positive correlation. And it's good because they've used a large sample size. Explain how the presence of fish in a lake could cause an increase in the number of water beetle species. Fish feed on predator or consumer of the water beetle. Question 8. Ecologists use a method called proportional sampling to estimate the population size of an animal species. This method is based on assumptions. 2 of the assumptions are given below. They know the size of the area where the animal population lives. The animals are uniformly distributed in this area. To carry out the method, the ecologists chose a region of known size, R, inside area A. They counted the number of animals in region R. They called this number S. Assumed that the number S would be proportional to the size of the total population P in area A. Proportional sampling can be used to estimate the population size of a species that is uniformly distributed. What is a species? It is organisms that can breed together or interbreed and produce fertile offspring. What is meant by uniformly distributed? There is the same number of organisms in each region, or they're equally spread. Use the letters A, R and S to write an equation showing how proportional sampling is used to estimate the total size of a population P. Show your working. So P equals AS. So A is the area. S is the number of animals in region R divided by the area of region R. Population size can be estimated using proportional sampling or marked release recapture. How do the assumptions made in proportional sampling differ from those made in marked release recapture? Well, in the marked release recapture, there's no assumption that organisms are uniformly distributed, and the size of the total area is not required. Give one assumption about the animals caught that is made in both methods. The animals are from the same population. A 75-metre tall tree released very large numbers of small seeds. Ecologists use quadrats along a transect to measure the number of these seeds at different distances from the tree. Their results are shown on the graph. The seeds of this tree are dispersed by wind. The diagram shows the pattern of seed dispersal from this tree. Describe how the ecologists could have used quadrats and a transect to obtain the data from which the graph was drawn. So quadrats would be placed at intervals along the transect, and the number of seeds counted per quadrat to calculate the seeds per metre squared. Anolis sagre is a species of lizard that is found on some of the smallest Caribbean islands. Describe how you could use the mark release recapture method to estimate the number of Anolis sagre on one of these islands. Capture or collect the sample, mark them and release them. Make sure that the method of marking does not harm the lizard or make it more visible to predators. Leave sufficient time for the lizards to distribute before collecting the second sample. Once you've collected the second sample, you calculate the population by doing the number in the first sample times by the number in the second sample divided by the number of marked lizards in the second sample. Question 11. Succession occurs in natural ecosystems. Describe and explain how succession occurs. Succession. So the first thing is that there is colonisation by a pioneer species. Then the pioneer species change the environment or habitat or conditions, and this makes the environment less hostile for new species. Or the environment becomes more suitable for new species. And at the same time, the environment becomes less suitable for previous species. So the previous species is outcompeted. There is a change or increase in biodiversity, and then eventually you end up with a climax community. Question 12. A 75-metre tall tree released very large numbers of small seeds. Ecologists used quadrats along a transect to measure the number of these seeds at different distances from the tree. Their results are shown on the graph. The seeds of the tree are dispersed by wind. The diagram shows a pattern of seed dispersal from this tree. Agricultural scientists divided a field into a number of different plots. They planted soybean seeds in these plots at different sowing densities. The diagram shows how these plots were arranged. The numbers show the sowing densities in seeds per metre squared, and the plots containing seeds sown at a density of 250 seeds per metre squared have been shaded. The scientists recorded the number of soybean plants growing in each plot at different times after the start of the investigation. Their results are shown in the table. A scientist measured the number of seeds landing at different distances from a parent tree. He then produced a theoretical model. He used this model to predict how the number of new trees that grew from the seeds and survived varied with distance from the parent tree. The scales used for the two vertical axes are different. The predictions from this model are summarised in the graph. Explain why the model predicts a low number of surviving trees at point A. It's because the distance from the parent tree is very low, so therefore there will be competition from the parent tree. Or there's a large number of seeds, so they'll all be competing for things like light or nutrients. Explain why the model predicts a low number of surviving trees at point B. It's because there's less seeds. There might be interspecific competition with other species, or the conditions might be unsuitable. Question 13. Lettuce is classified in the same family as dandelions. Dandelions commonly grow on roadside verges and may accidentally be sprayed with salt when salt is added to the road in winter. Describe how you could use a transect to investigate whether the distribution of dandelions changed with increased distance from the road. First of all, you would lay a tape at right angles or perpendicular to the road. You would take samples at regular intervals using a quadrat, and you would count the numbers or percentage cover of dandelions, and you would use several transects.